Shalom, shalom. Brother Matthew here. I wanted to chime in and do a quick video about the first new moon of the year. We celebrated the Abib new moon this past Sunday on the Gregorian calendar from Saturday evening to Sunday evening. We celebrated the first new moon of the year. A lot of people believe that the first new moon cannot begin until after the spring equinox. Let me say from the get-go that anybody that believes that is my brother. As long as they believe in the Father and the Son and keeping of the commandments, they're my brother in the Messiah. And I love them, and I'm not knocking them, and I believe that way for 15 years until I believe Yahweh showed me a little bit greater understanding on that, at least where I'm at currently. I believe that the Abib new moon can take place before the equinox so long as the full moon takes place in the vernal season or the spring season. I believe what the criteria was historically was that let us make sure that the Passover, which is centered around the fullness of the moon, the Passover is slaughtered in the new season. You don't want to keep two Passovers in one season, so make sure the Passover is slaughtered in the new season, which I do believe is determined by the spring equinox, which can happen on March 19th, 20th, or 21st. That is one of 2 days in the year that the sun rises directly due east and sets due west. You've heard the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. That only happens technically 2 days a year, spring equinox and fall equinox. So I believe that the new year is determined by using the spring equinox, but I believe the way that it's determined is make sure that Passover takes place after the spring equinox. However, some people say, well, if we begin the Abib new moon before the spring equinox, we're going to have some days in the previous season of winter and not all days in the new season of the spring. And that is true. However, and this is something, maybe you need to pause the video, maybe you can write it out. I don't have any fancy charts to show you, it's just me talking. Think about this. If, let's say, that instead of using last new moon, which just took place March the 18th, instead of using that new moon as Abib 1, let's say you use that for your 12th moon of the year or 13th moon of the year, the last moon of the year. If that's the case, then while your first few days of the 12th moon or 13th moon are in the winter season, the rest of the days after the equinox in your last moon of the year will be in the new spring season. And so what we have here is a catch-22. Yes, it is true that I started the month of Abib before the new spring season, but if you didn't and you kept the last moon of the year, that means the majority of your days in the last moon are going to be in the new season. And so you have to pick which one is the best option, which one is the best choice. I believe based upon all the available evidence that the best choice is to make sure you take the new moon, whichever one is the first full moon of the spring season. In other words, when I say you take the new moon, you take the month in which that full moon falls in the spring season, the very first one. And I believe that's what was done anciently. And this is why later on in the 2nd century AD, this didn't happen in the 1st century, but in the 2nd century AD, there were some in Christianity that began to keep Pascha, which is the Greek word for Passover. They began to keep it on the Sunday that followed the 14th day of Abib, which followed the equinox. And even to this day, you see by its later Germanic Anglo-Saxon name, Easter, you see that Easter is actually determined in part by the solar lunar calendar. Easter fluctuates. It can happen from March 22nd, I think, to like April 19th or something like that. But Easter fluctuates, and that's because it's determined by the first full moon of the spring season. You have the first full moon that happens after the spring equinox, and then Easter is celebrated on the Sunday after that. Historically, there's a reason behind that. Anyhow, just wanted to chime in and talk about the Abib new moon. Looking forward to Passover. Looking forward to eating lamb and unleavened bread and bitter herbs as Yahweh commands us to do in Exodus chapter 12. I've been keeping that commandment now since 1998. I think this will be my 20th Passover, either 20th or 21st Passover I've ever kept. and very thankful. Blessed are all they that do his commandments, Revelation says. And blessed are the undefiled in the way who walk in the law of Yahweh, Psalm 119. All his commandments are sure, they stand fast forever and ever, and are done in truth and uprightness. Praise Almighty Yahweh. Praise his holy name. Until next time, shalom.